Good afternoon. It's time for the first episode here of Never Punt, Never Parlay, a college football show where we're going to talk about the game. We're going to talk about betting. We're going to talk about lines and angles and have a good time doing it starting this Tuesday, today, and meeting every week right about this time all the way through the college football season. I am your host, Parker Fleming. Many of you listened and watched this space last year for Parker's previews. We've evolved, we've adapted, we've improved this offseason, and I'm delighted to welcome my colleague and friend, Douglas Farmer, to the show, not just for today, but for this entire season. Douglas will be joining me here all season as we talk about best bets, smart plays, how to think about football, how to think about gambling, and putting a little bit of pen to paper with the numbers to kind of understand reasonable expectations and make informed predictions about the game. So very excited for all this to start. Douglas, a very long-winded introduction, but you can tell how excited I am. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad for us to start this show.
Well, you make me worry when you say you improved over the offseason and the primary improvement is bringing me in. That's a bar to reach. I listened to Parker's previews last year.
Look, if I bring you on and you give terrible predictions, that just helps me. Then I'm no longer the worst picker on my show. So it's a win-win for me. Either you're great and our average goes up, or you're worse than me and I feel good about myself. So a win either way there. But really, really excited to be here. We are, of course, part of the Hammer Network. You can follow and subscribe on Twitter, the Hammer HQ. And this show, if you're watching it right now, you're on YouTube. You're at the Hit the Books HQ. And that is a great college football show over there with Joey and Brad that you should subscribe to, obviously, and listen and watch. But we will be sharing a feed with them all fall. So for the Hammer college football content, you have one feed. You'll get all the shows you want and all the shows you need. So make sure you're subscribed there. Make sure you're all following up so you don't miss any episodes. Today, we're going to do a little bit of an intro to the show, talk about kind of what we want to do this fall, and then we're going to break down the SEC and the Sun Belt. We're going to this summer we're going to do 2 conferences a week for the next couple of weeks until week 0. We start getting into games. We kind of have a structured flow how we talk about through each conference and through our picks and through our plays. Douglas, do you want to tell us our viewers a little bit about kind of the general structure of today's show? What are we going to do for each conference, and what are we going to talk about?
You think you and I may have been a little overambitious or just savvy when we said 2 conferences per week. We're looking at more than 30 teams between the SEC and the Sun Belt. We're not going to discuss all 30 teams. That would be about 2 or 3 times longer than we intend to go this afternoon. But we're also not just going to talk about Georgia, Alabama, LSU. We are here to talk about, Vanderbilt or Tennessee or Mississippi State. We are here to talk about James Madison as well as Arkansas State and Texas State. We're going to cover the entire gamut of the conferences, even if we don't get to each team. The idea here is to hit some win total over-unders, hit some futures, and maybe even come up with a long shot or 2 or the longest of shots, and just to give an idea of what the season is coming. As much as it is about gambling, it's about previewing this fall.
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely want to maintain that balance. In many ways, talking about lines and talking about betting is not just encouraging you to put money on things. It's certainly not encouraging you. And it's not, necessarily saying that's the most important part of the game, but it is a good way for us to make predictions, to understand kind of when we're watching the game, what are we thinking about? And then we could test our hypotheses by putting pen to paper and making predictions. So I'm excited for this. I think this will be a very good, I think it's gonna be a fun show as we kind of, we move our conversations from the DMs and the text messages to out in public on the on the show. So should be a lot of fun.
Maybe not all of them.
No, yeah, there was, we'll find a filter for sure. We'll find the middle ground. But let's go ahead and if it's all right with you, let's get into the SEC. Let's start talking about some of these teams. Generally, I think we both have. Oh, you have 4. I have 3 plays here in the SEC, and again, just talking about futures, and what we'll do is we'll have a couple plays, we'll have a couple flyers. So we'll have win total plays, we'll have a couple flyers, and then we'll talk about the conference championships and how you might strategically approach thinking about the relative odds and who is going to come out on top there. So Douglas, with no further ado, let's start in the SEC. What's your first play here?
Well, my first play, you and I were talking about this afternoon. I wanted to run it by you. It's not actually a play, it's a piece of gambling conversation. And if we're talking college football in 2023, we have to start with Georgia. You can't, there's a reason we're starting with the SEC today. They're looking for the first three-peat in almost 100 years. The last team to win 3 titles in a row was University of Minnesota in 1934 to 1936. That's what Georgia's looking for this year. And their over-under is as high as 11 and a half. And you and I were talking, and I keep thinking, Parker, this makes no sense. If you were to money line parlay Georgia all season, you're going to do better than the plus 120 you would get if you bet they're over. The best odds on the board are over 11 and a half at DraftKings. And I looked at their 5 SEC games where they'll be favored by fewer than 3 touchdowns: at Auburn, versus Kentucky, versus Florida, versus Mississippi, at Tennessee. And I tried to make my math as conservative as I could. If you parlay those 5 money lines, you're already going to be pushing plus 160, plus 170 in your payout. I'm not saying bet the under, but I am saying absolutely nobody should bet this over Georgia total because it's foolish and it's poor form.
Yeah, it does. I really like that angle and really like kind of how you think about that there. It really is something that again, hey, maybe I think they're going to three-peat, but that we're at the tail end of the distribution here. And just again, the probability that they hit the over plus the variance, almost all variance in the season is going to be negative. Certainly, especially if you're a little bit ambitious and a little bit ahead of the game, you could get those money lines earlier in the season and come out better on top. So again, I love that our first example or our first kind of point of conversation is talking about, again, the strategy behind not just do we think Georgia's going to three-peat, because I think there's a lot of arguments for that, but the argument is it a plus EV move to take this over at those current odds? And I think you can plainly see with the money line, just doing a little bit of the back of the envelope math, if you will, that's not a solid bet. So interesting. I like that we kind of have a null result for our first one there with Georgia. I'm going to go ahead then and turn to one of my first plays that I actually am surprised that I like so much. But look, the Auburn Tigers did not have a good year last year, Douglas. I don't think that's unfair to say. I don't think anyone would disagree with me.
Trying to remember. Yeah, you know what? They were a little below average. Yes, I remember this.
Some might even say that the Auburn Tigers last 2 or 3 years have been a little bit aloof, maybe. Just not exactly where they want to be. And look, Hugh Freeze has shown that he knows how to win at a very high level in the SEC. And one thing that Hugh Freeze can do is put together an offense that can score points. Now, look, transfer Peyton Thorne comes in. There's mixed opinions about whether he's actually the solution, but if anyone can make Peyton Thorne into a high-level quarterback, I think that Hugh Freeze is one of those guys, certainly a good enough quarterback. Last year, Auburn was 103rd in offensive EPA per play, 123rd in the pass. The total that I have here is Auburn over 7, plus 115 at Caesars. And that's the one I'm going to take there. I just need an 8-4 season out of Hugh Freeze's first campaign. I need a combination of Hugh Freeze substantially raising Auburn's floor. Last year, they could not put together a passing offense to save their life. God love Robbie Ashford. God love TJ Finley. They were trying their best, but they could not get the ball downfield. I really like seven wins here. Again, you really just need that 8-4 to kind of give you positive value here. And you get a little bit of plus money on that. I think this one's a no-brainer and absolutely out of the park here with Hugh Freeze coming in, ton of transfers and led by Thorne. This feels like a very, very solid play for a team that should be in that 8-win range basically every year.
When you mentioned that to me, my only thought was Parker must just be banking on last year was a mess. And that alone is regression to the mean. Doesn't always mean a bad thing. They've got some talent. I can absolutely understand making that play. And you went for a bounce back. My first official play here is going to be a continuing trend. There's a team in the SEC that has gotten massively better in the last 2 years, and I don't think we're giving them enough credit yet. Vanderbilt's over-under is only 4 wins. This is a team that's returning its primary quarterback last season. It's returning 8 defensive starters, and the weak point is supposedly its defense. Clark Lee just signed a nice contract extension because he's doing things right, and he's a defensive mind. If you go from the SP Plus ratings following the 21 season, to the SP Plus ratings following the 22 season, their defense improved from 115th in the country to 94th. If they improve a little bit more this year, and that is supposedly the weak spot, I don't see how this team doesn't win at least 4 games. They've got Hawaii, Alabama, A&M, and UNLV in their non-con. And no offense to Wake Forest, I love watching that offense as much as anybody, maybe more than most. But you can't even tell me going to Wake Forest is a surefire loss in September. There's a very reasonable chance, once again, Vanderbilt hits the over in September. And I'm not going to turn down that possibility for a quick win this season.
I like it. I like it a lot. Vanderbilt's certainly on that kind of Bobby Bowden stretch of, losing crushing losses or getting crushing losses and then winning. They're definitely on the right trajectory. And something you don't see a lot in college football is a coach with a very strong vision who has a booster group that is able to help him enact that vision and willing to kind of sit back and say, we'll let the coach be in charge. How many college football programs have great vision at the leadership position, don't have the guy to enact it? Have to talk up my guy, AJ Swan. I do feel like legitimately just a very, very good option there at quarterback and a very exciting offense. And they do get a little momentum with it rolling. Wake Forest probably going to be a little bit down relative to last year. That'll be a really hard test, but let's put up some points against Hawaii. Let's put up some points against Alabama A&M. And then boom, I just got to win 3 the rest of the way. I get this. I'm a little skeptical because I do think that sometimes the swing, the growth curve, if you will, gets a little steep in terms of estimation. And but I do think that Vanderbilt is taking steps in the right way, and I do like how their schedule lines up. Let's move to another. We're going to keep the same color scheme. Going to go for a little black and gold, a little black and yellow. Let's talk about the Missouri Tigers. Oh, go ahead.
It's almost like that's our color scheme.
Maybe this is just what we're doing. Maybe we're only going to talk about black and yellow, black and gold teams this entire season. The Missouri Tigers are an interesting football team for a lot of reasons, but the line that I'm seeing here is over 6 minus 115 at Circa. What I really like here is kind of a combination of things. One, on the offensive side of the ball, they can go back to Brady Cook, who I think is not going to be an excellent quarterback by any stretch of the imagination, but can be a high enough floor quarterback to make things go. Obviously, they have wide receiver talent and Luther Birding, and they're bringing in Oklahoma transfer Theo Weiss. He was one of my wide receiver dudes for this year, guys that averaged last year an average depth of target of greater than 13 and more than 6 yards after catch. That's kind of generally historically been a vague threshold for really good wide receivers. Some of those guys last year were Jaden Reed, A.T. Perry, Xavier Worthy from Texas, Quentin Johnson from TCU. So a pretty good threshold for who's going to be talented. And the fact that they have Luther there and they bring in Theo Weiss, I think that's going to give them another option downfield, really take a lot of gravity away from Birding and from the run game. And I think Missouri can play a pretty competent, if not boring, style of football here to kind of take a step forward from that 80th offensive EPA per play last year. They're 26th defense. I think that they've been consistently overall able to defend well. And if they can get that offensive success rate from the 90s, the 36.7 overall, right? Let's take that from the 90s to the 60s even. Pop in a few more explosive plays with Weiss there. I see the vision. I like how Missouri's schedule breaks generally. And so I'm going to believe that they're not just going to be a bowl eligible team, that they're going to be in the money here and hit that 7-win threshold. If you look at their schedule for 2023, the non-con last year was really hard, right? You had that Kansas State. They get Kansas State at home, but they will have a nice kind of South Dakota, Middle Tennessee, Memphis padding around that. And then you're talking Vanderbilt. We've got a lot of wins early on. And then, you host Tennessee, you host Florida, you host South Carolina. Kentucky's been a little rough at the end. And then surprisingly, Missouri's actually kind of owned Arkansas. And so I feel decent about that, even if they travel there. So I like Missouri, not as a team that I'm going to say, hey, they're going to win the SEC, they're going to win their division or anything, but 6 feels like just a little bit too low for what they can do if this offense takes the step I think they will take with a little bit of competence at quarterback and an extended downfield option in Theo Weiss.
It's always a good idea to bet a team on the over. When the previous season they went 2-4 in one-score games, as you said, Brady Cook, a ho-hum, an average quarterback, but you have to think he's going to do better in those one-score games. And if they flip that 2-4 to 4-2 in those close games, you're going to cruise over.
Yeah, absolutely, and laugh while we're cashing pretty early there. So again, not two teams that I like. Again, am I going to feel confident about either of those two teams head to head in a lot of plays this fall? I don't think so. But on the aggregate, I'm thinking money line. I think we can get there. So I like that Auburn and Missouri line. You have do we have? We don't have any more SEC totals. You've got. Go ahead.
I have no more SEC totals, but I did want to mention a flyer. I wanted to mention a questionable idea I've had, and it's value. I'm seeing value. Just like Crash Davis believed in the small of a woman's back, hanging curveballs and good scotch. I believe in having accounts at a dozen sports books. I believe in shopping lines until 5 a.m. on a Saturday morning. And I believe the only thing better than finishing a good glass of Tullamore Dew is finding double the value in a future than is available anywhere else. Now, it's hard to do that with futures. You can't just log into BetStamp like we'd like you to because futures aren't as readily available. Scan the QR code, sign up for BetStamp. But I did go through every book I could find, and I found an SEC future of a team returning their starting quarterback, a starting quarterback who's already been hyped on this podcast. They're on an upward trajectory. They return 8 defensive starters. Do I think Vanderbilt is going to win the SEC? No. Do I think spending $5 and 1,000 to 1 bet is a better use of $5 than anything else I'll do this week? Absolutely. That's available only at Circa. Anywhere else, it's 500 to 1. If I can get that double the value just because I took the time to look around, I'm going to take that double the value.
Look, I don't love this, but I don't hate it. I think that's where I'm landing on the $5 Vanderbilt YOLO bet there. That's a lot. You start talking about implied probabilities. Taking a flyer on Vanderbilt there is certainly not the most insane thing that anyone could do for, of course, a very reasonable amount. I wonder if perhaps the distribution of possible outcomes is not continuous and might be discrete, and we have some concerns about the actual probabilities there. But I understand the reasoning behind this. I have a flyer that's a little less crazy. I think my flyer is just a little bit more of, are we sure? And the question is, are we sure that hiring Bobby Petrino and getting a healthy quarterback for an entire season isn't going to be the bounce back that Texas A&M needs to take one of the most talented rosters in college football and push over the hump this fall? Alabama, not returning a ton of production. LSU has some defensive issues that Brian Kelly mentioned the other day at Big 12, or excuse me, Brian Kelly wasn't at Big 12 Media Days, at SEC Media Days that he mentioned. And Texas A&M, 112th in EPA per play last year on offense, just absolutely abysmal, but 44th unadjusted EPA per play. That's playing in the SEC. So obviously when your opponent adjusts that, that's going to be a top 20 defense. Super talented roster, continue to recruit really, really well. They bring in Bobby Petrino. Why not the Aggies at plus 1,600 at Circa to win the SEC outright?
I can't argue with any of it. I'm lower on A&M than most people because I'm lower on Jimbo Fisher at this point. It's been a downward trajectory for him for a decade now. They won that title with Jimbo, with Jameis Winston and Tallahassee in 13 or 14, and Jimbo Fisher has just trended downward since then. Sure, they're still pulling in the recruits, but you're banking a lot on Bobby Petrino, in my opinion, and I'm not willing to do that because it's Bobby Petrino.
It could just be that I was born and raised an Arkansas fan and have a soft spot in my heart for some of those teams that he put together before that all happened. But generally, I think the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and expecting different results. And Jimbo, say what you will about the coordinators that he's hired, has said, hey, guys that have been successful elsewhere, come on, let me step back from responsibilities. Let me take my 1,500 page playbook. Maybe you can condense it to 600 pages, and then maybe my quarterback can fully understand the offense. We can run everything we want to run and put up some numbers there. So in the same way, again, I want to be very careful about our declination. Neither of these we're not going to track either of these. We're not going to say, awesome, we did great. We might check in to say these are funny, but just a total flyer there for Vanderbilt and for Texas A&M. Anybody else that you like in terms of a play, in terms of a pick on winning the conference, Douglas?
Well, I have one more flyer, one more kind of a long shot, and it's It's a tough one for me because I don't really believe in this quarterback. I think if one person tells you a horse and a second person tells you a horse, you're probably a horse. And Joe Milton has lost a quarterback job to Cade McNamara, and Joe Milton has lost a job to Hendon Hooker. And I think Joe Milton might be a backup quarterback at the NCAA level. Not to poke the bear known as Parker Fleming there, but I will say when I get Tennessee at 20-1, you're betting on Joe Milton 20-1. That's worthwhile. Their defense is returning 14 contributors. That's the worrisome spot for them in the Josh Heupel world. Anytime you can return an experienced defense, you've got to believe in the offense. They get both Georgia and Texas A&M in Knoxville. I'm not saying I love this play, but I love the value where the question mark is a Josh Heupel quarterback. That quarterback has proven arm strength, and I can get it at 20-1. I'm willing to throw a dart at that.
I don't hate it. 40.7% of Joe Milton's passing attempts, very limited sample last year, were 20 plus yards downfield, which is just absolutely absurd. He obviously has a cannon. Who knows? Heupel can work his magic and get there. I think especially in the SEC East, it's kind of the same argument of Georgia a little bit. It's like, the schedule generally, everybody else on your schedule is going to be down. You go to Alabama, but you do host Texas A&M and Georgia. You can get away with going 2-3 there. That back-to-back of Missouri and Georgia makes me a little bit nervous in terms of can they survive both of those, especially if they drop, Texas A&M and Alabama back-to-back. They've got to win both of those games there. So a couple tight spots for me that make this a little bit of stay away from me. But again, offense wins championships, man. That's the new college football that we are in, and they are going to score a lot of points. Now, they might allow other people to score a lot of points. I think they were 110th in defensive EPA last year, but they are going to score a lot of points.
I have to commend you, Parker. You really refrained from excessive Joe Milton praise there. I look forward to you really cutting loose in September or October.
Well, I really just am trying to wait for mock draft season to hype up Joe Milton a little bit more. But Joe Milton, a very fun college football player. Let the reader understand as to our assessment of his true quality. But I do believe he can sling the ball unlike anyone else. One more for me from the SEC, and then looking at time, we should hop on over to the Sun Belt because I want to give equal attention to our friends over there in a very interesting conference. I'm going to be boring and say my second futures flyer here. Alabama plus 300 at DraftKings to win the SEC, plus 300 for a Nick Saban team that went 10-2 last year, lost 2 one-score games. When they were healthy, beat the ever-loving tar out of a very good Kansas State team. I think Saban's underrated. I saw a headline yesterday that said, is Nick Saban's legacy in the balance this year? No, objectively not. They're not returning a lot of production, but they bring in Tommy Rees. He's got his guy. They have a vision at quarterback. They have a vision there. And Ja'Cory Brooks on the dude list. Again, 13 average depth of target and 6 or more yards after catch. They had terrible wide receiver play last year, but 2 years ago, they didn't have guys either, like the last 2 seasons, a couple of wide receivers away. I think Brooks gets all season, takes a step forward, and Alabama should be reloaded and competing at the top again. So give me plus 300 on Nick Saban. I feel like that's a little unfair for me to be able to bet that. But all he's got to do is is split with Tennessee and then take care of business in the SEC championship there. So I like this one, as boring as it is to bet on Alabama. For giving me plus odds, I think it's worth it.
I have a counterpoint, and my counterpoint is Tommy Rees doesn't help you win on the road. In the last 2 seasons, Alabama has gone 2-7 against the spread on the road, 6-3 straight up. This year, they've got to go to A&M. They've got to go to Auburn. They host Tennessee. They host LSU. So you can go ahead and suggest Alabama there. I'm going to go with LSU at 215 to win the West. Fact of the matter is, right here is a wedding gift for a friend of mine that is LSU to win the national championship. He doesn't know that. Maybe I just told him that's his wedding gift. For me, it's not as much as it is a bet on LSU. I'm betting on Alabama to continue this very slow downturn, especially on the road. Those 2 hard road games, and then they've got Tennessee. LSU doesn't have to face Tennessee. LSU can beat Alabama to win the West, or LSU can just win everything else and bank on Bama dropping 2. I won't be too shocked if that happens.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I think I'm a little bit more, it might be unfair, but I'm a little bit more concerned about LSU's defensive issues than I am necessarily, especially in the back end. They bring a lot of transfers. I'm going to trust trust Saban a little bit more there, but I like that we disagree. And again, I like I'm getting 300 on Saban there. I feel like that's a good end of the bargain. Certainly impressive what Brian Kelly is doing down there, and the stars do seem to be aligning for him and Jaden Daniels to take care of business this fall. Plus, nice with just winning the West, you don't have to worry about the situation last year where LSU to the playoff. You're having to do some math about like, do I bet them in the championship game? Do I bet them to lose to Alabama? Like, how do I hedge this? Pretty clear there. Just win the West, and you're taken care of. Let's move over to the conference that many people are calling America's Conference, a very very fun group of 5 conference. Added some new teams this year. The Sun Belt should be a lot of fun, even as there is a lot of uncertainty in the conference and a couple guys that a couple differences. In terms of who's coaching where and then who's playing who. But let's start up there. What's your first play here for the Conference the Sun Belt? I'll do it again. The Sun Belt.
A lot of my Sun Belt thinking comes down to the scheduling matrix. For such a competitive conference, it is very much tiered. There are, in my opinion, 6 very good teams in this conference. 5 of them could win the conference title. To my understanding, James Madison cannot win the conference championship, but James Madison is one of those 6 good teams. And then there are 3 bad teams, just bad, in Old Dominion, Louisiana Monroe, and Texas State. You've got a little bit of middle class in there. So when I look at this conference, I break it down. Who do you play at home and who do you play on the road? You want to play those good teams at home. You want to play those bad teams on the road. And that sends me to Louisiana Lafayette. And under 7.5 gets you at BetMGM. They play 2 of the bad teams at home, which is just wasting a home game. You're going to beat Monroe at Monroe. You don't want to play them at home. And they get 2 of the good on the road in South Alabama and Troy. Those factors alone make me think that Louisiana Lafayette's going to end up 7-5 or 6-6. To lose this bet, Louisiana Lafayette is going to at least need to win 2 of 3 against Georgia State, Arkansas State, and Southern Mississippi. Needing to win at least 2 of those 3, maybe all 3 if they stumble in the non-con. That right there makes me think this squad is no longer Billy Napier's powerhouse. It's starting to drop off, and you can see, and the schedule this year does it no favors.
Yeah, that is certainly a rough breakdown there. And it's hard. I like the Raging Cajuns, man. I like what they've been able to do, but it is hard to keep that up consistently, especially with the coaching turnover on the side. Yeah, okay. I like that. I think the scheduling does matter a lot here. Mine's going to be another pessimistic one. I hate to start with 2 pessimistic bets here, but I think Arkansas State was just not a great football team last year. I don't think that's a too big of a deal or too big of a claim to make. Arkansas State last season, 124th in EPA per play margin, 112th on offense, 112th on defense. I do believe, if I'm saying this correctly off the top of my head, bottom 10 in plays over 20 plus yards on offense and bottom 10 on plays over 20 plus yards allowed. Like some of their metrics were actually a little wonky because they were just giving up like 1 play touchdowns or 3 and outs. Like if they were giving up any success, they were getting scored on and just very, very, very bad. 125th in points per quality possession allowed, 4.78. And of course, just very bad on offense, 91st in field position, 121st in game control. Not a lot to be happy about there. Have done some blocking metrics over last year and just continue to be unimpressed with their offensive line and their consistency. It does seem like they're just not in a good place to build at all. And if I look at their schedule, their non-con, they've got at Oklahoma. They've got Memphis comes to Jonesboro, and then they go to UMass, a game they should win. But again, I'm a little wary. And then if you look at how this conference breaks down, you got to go at Troy. You're going to lose at home versus Coastal. ULM's a game you probably should win. You want to win if you're Arkansas State. That's at Louisiana Monroe. You're going at South Alabama, and then at Marshall to finish the season. I don't like how the schedule breaks down. I'm not optimistic about the quality of talent on their roster, and I'm not optimistic about how they have enacted their vision and how they execute with just some of those underlying metrics about the offensive line. So I am going to take Arkansas State under 4.5. That's plus 110 at Circa right now.
It might come down to as simple as the schedule. I said there are 6 good teams in this conference. Arkansas State faces 5 of them. That's just it's a tough draw for them, and it's already a subpar squad. I really like this play, especially when you're getting that plus value on the 110 at Circa.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think again, there's shades of gray with like who's good and who's bad. I think we can say Sun Belt good is probably an accurate description of the conference. But yeah, I think that Arkansas State, not a good team and got a kind of rough draw here.
And it kind of fits the one of those six Sun Belt good teams they don't face is James Madison. And that right there, you immediately know James Madison's schedule is a little bit harder than it would be otherwise if they had Arkansas State. I like the under on James Madison, but it's more than just that they don't play Arkansas State. Some of it is shopping. I'm able to get it at 8.5 at BetMGM. Elsewhere, you're looking at betting under 8. I can get that 8.5. Again, you need to shop for these. BetStamp helps compare odds across sportsbooks for games and futures. That QR code, I'm told, will help you sign up, and it is a necessary move if you want to get the right value. The other piece of this number is not just the 8.5. I'm betting regression. Quarterback Todd Centineo is gone. He threw 25 touchdowns and 5 interceptions last year. For a guy who had not really impressed anybody, he exploded. Now they brought in an Arizona transfer and they brought in a Wake Forest transfer, and most people can't name either one. The only reason I know Brett Griffiths out of Wake Forest is because he had to start a game last year when Sam Hartman had that health scare. But otherwise, neither of these guys have done anything to prove themselves. This is an offense that in conference play last year averaged more than 36 points a game. That's going to fall off. They lost 4 of their top 5 receivers. One of the transfers they brought in barely played at South Florida. This team is not ready to score 36 a game again, and that's going to show. They're going to need to pick up every win they can with that lackluster offense. This is a high total, 8.5. I will take that under and I'll enjoy it.
Yeah, I like this one a lot. This is almost one of my plays, and I certainly agree with it. And perhaps you've persuaded me that it is a good idea. James Madison started out to a big jump last year, but I think a lot of that was Todd Centineo. Am I the only one who kind of wish that? Look, I love Clay Millen at Colorado State. I think they're interesting, and we'll certainly talk about them when we get to Mountain West. But I kind of wish we could have seen Todd Centineo in that Norvell offense at Colorado State last year. Certainly was slinging around, and they played a pretty good defense. But again, your opponent adjusted it, and man, that was just it was a very fun start to the season for them. I do think there is a little bit of regression due for James Madison this season.
You've got 2 more plays here, and both of them surprised me. I'll be honest.
But okay. So one of them is less spicy than the other. Southern Miss last season. Quarterback roulette. Frank Gore was running the. Frank Gore Jr. was running the. I wouldn't even call it a wildcat because he was like actually running the offense and just playing quarterback. But they had a lot of issues and were 119th in EPA per play offense. But they were 32nd in defensive EPA per play, specifically on offense and defense, 12th in field position on offense, 43rd in field position on defense. I'm trusting in Will Hall. He's had good offenses everywhere he goes. And I'm trusting that last year was a lot of problem with a lot of that their problems were kind of due to injuries, and I think we'll get a little bit of positive regression here. They're going, non-con does not do them any favors. Florida State and Tulane. I like that they're being aggressive. That's going to be very, very rough to start the season. But again, you get Arkansas State, you get Old Dominion, you get ULM. You go to Louisiana again. We've mentioned they're not going to be great, and then I think that 5 is just a little bit too low here. I think they can clearly make a bowl with this schedule. They just they don't even need an upset to get to 6 with the schedule, and so I'm trusting in Will Hall. I'm trusting in the positive regression on offense, and I'm trusting in the consistency on defense there. Southern Mississippi over 5 wins. That currently is at 100 per plus 100 at DraftKings.
What's curious here, Parker, is you started to list off the games you think they should win. You mentioned Louisiana Monroe. You mentioned Old Dominion. You mentioned Louisiana Lafayette. You left off a team that most people would think South Mississippi should beat without too much trouble. A team that I would think South Mississippi should beat without too much trouble. And I think you left that team off because you're trying to thread a needle with 2 consecutive win totals here where they go against each other.
I don't know that they go against each other. I don't like that they're on each other's schedule. But if you look at Texas State's schedule this season, one, GJ King comes in. They have 60 transfer. I mean, basically second behind Colorado in terms of number of number of transfers this fall. I think that they've got multiple options at quarterback that could do a lot. TJ Finley transfer over. And I mean, I really like the 4.5 year. I think they could very well beat a team like Nevada, especially at home. I'm not projecting that, but then all I need from them, if they beat Jackson State, right? I have 4.5 year. All I need is ULM. That's 2. And then I need an Arkansas State. That's 3. And then I'm at 4. I just need one game to break. I like the probability of that. And I think again they win that Nevada game, and we're sitting quite pretty. So I think that Texas State is one of those teams that's in a development cycle that is that growth curve is actually. I said the growth curve got too steep on some teams. I think that their growth curve with the transfers is actually a little steeper than is being presumed here with 4 wins.
It's a bold approach, and one I will not be endorsing, partially because a lot of my Sunbelt futures are based on teams beating up on Texas State. So I'm hoping for the bet. Maybe they can just win 4 and you can break, but they're not 4 that matter to me. A lot of my Sunbelt futures are based on the scheduling. There are 2 teams who get Texas State, Louisiana Monroe, and Old Dominion, which is 2 different divisions. Not everybody's going to get all 3 of them. And it's such a head start in a conference that's going to be competitive like this. So I'm going to throw a flyer on Georgia Southern at plus 1,800 at DraftKings. And then I'm also going to throw the same flyer on South Mississippi at plus 4,000, 40-1 at Circa, because they both are going to have this, what I'm presuming to be 3-0 conference head start. And in a conference where Coastal Carolina is going to beat up on App State, it's going to beat up on Marshall, going to beat up on Troy, going to beat up on South Alabama, that 3-0 head start could be crucial just to get them to the conference championship game.
Yeah, and I like that logic. I do. I think that's more than defensible. Georgia Southern, of course, with a just a very good offense last year. They're running. They used to be a triple team and now are running a pretty aggressive offense. And going to get his name. Davis Bren from Tulsa, who had a very good vertical downfield throw. Right, is transferring in. Last year, 29th in offensive VPA per play. They're 122nd on defense. Can they take a step forward? Certainly plausible. And so I don't think that's a bad long shot at all there. I've got one more.
Left. One left that we agree on.
I think we agree, and then I'll let you talk about your other one there. But I think App State to win the conference plus 700 smells pretty nice to me. Kind of boring consistency out of App State. And they beat Texas A&M last year, took care of business, but then we're up and down. The thing that's fun about the Sun Belt is that their splits are always going to be crazy just because it's very hard to do both sides of the ball well. But 36th in EPA per play last year, 96th on the defensive side of the ball, 36 on offense. That is one thing that I really look to improve, and that I think is a little bit more of negative regression. I like to, and Douglas, we've talked about this. I like to look at the game in terms of early downs, late downs, rushing, passing. On offense, they are at, on defense, 51st in early downs EPA, allowed 113th on 3rd and 4th down success. That's not all. There is signal in there, right? That's not all nonsense, but a split that big really, really tells me that, hey, there's potentially something to iron out here. If you're stopping guys on early downs, especially with the schedule that you're playing, and then you're not stopping them on 3rd and 4th downs. So if I was going to circle a team and say, hey, I like your offensive upside, I think you're kind of boringly consistent. And I think that you can be an outside contender if you can take a step forward. I see some signs for a little bit of positive regression there for App State.
And they get their 2 biggest division challenges at home. Marshall and Coastal Carolina both have to go up to the Rock. So you combine your numbers with that just practical reality. That 700 to yes, we're betting them to win the conference. But really, if you get that 7-1 ticket into the title game, you're going to be in an enviable position. I put this in with you, and I'm also going to have a future on the other side of the bracket. This is as much me fading South Alabama as it is me endorsing Troy. South Alabama is the favorite at every book. They return 18 starters, but they have to go to Troy. They have to go to James Madison. And that right there gives me value in Troy at 350 at Circa Sports. They return only 6 starters on defense and on offense, but the defense, if I'm going to worry about something, it's there. But maybe your numbers will back me up. Maybe they won't. I thought their defense was more scheme than player. And if you grant me that, then this team should again be just this tough, miserable opponent that nobody wants to face, let alone South Alabama going to Troy. Get that at 350. I've got Appalachian State at 7-1. I look forward to that Sun Belt championship game between the two of them.
I think that'd be very fun. One thing about Troy, if I do recall, a lot of short fields for that defense, and one that's part of the game, right? That's something they're aiming for. Defense, special teams. Can I create turnovers? But a couple of their games, I mean, just absolute godsends in terms of turnovers. Games where they got beat in my post game success rate and my field position. Looking at like the I'm looking at my preview right now for UT San Antonio versus Troy last year. And 30th in defensive starting field position allowed. And again, 11th in net points per drive. So those are really correlated. They won the field position battle very well. And I feel like they got a couple short field scores that generally in my predictive metrics don't really, carry over game to game, let alone year to year. But they are I think the technical term is a hate and ass defense. And so I think if you believe that scheme and you believe those all go together, certainly justifiable there overall. Whew, what I'm looking at the time. I love that we've gone through this. We hit 41. That feels very good for a first show here. Have you seen the comments? I just saw the comments with this come up. I'm going to do this reaction live on air. Thank you guys for being here. I had no idea. I'm not seeing the YouTube or how many people are watching. I think in the future, perhaps we can try to answer some of those questions if you guys want to throw them in the comments, but flattered that you guys are all here. Douglas, we hit all of our bets. Am I correct? I'm looking at our sheets.
We did. I'm now seeing the comments too. I was too focused on making sure I read all my notes. We forgot to tell people to, like, subscribe, review, etc. Just that sales pitch. But otherwise, no, we hit all our bets. We agreed on one. We very much disagreed on another. That Alabama LSU West Division this season is going to be the earliest litmus test between the two of us. It's part of the fun of it. And that's why we'll also try to talk some trash to Brad and Joey at points, the other pod, one of the other pods under this Hit the Books HQ, because while I want to beat you, I want us to prove we're smarter than them.
Absolutely. That's what this is all about, man. Money is secondary object. I just want people to know I'm smart. No, I just like talking about the game, and I think that's all in fun. And it is my hope that for the rest of the season, we will check in on some of these futures, especially as they are relevant to games that will kind of determine these outcomes. Because then we get to Douglas, do the fun stuff. We can talk about, hey, what should I potentially do here to hedge? What should I potentially do to update my strategy throughout the season. So certainly fun. I'm going to read off a quick recap. Of course, you can find us on BetStamp as well. I think that Never Punt, Never Parlay is on BetStamp. I will find that link and 100% tweet it out to make sure that and perhaps we can get in the show notes so that you can see our bets tracked. Because again, documenting the process is certainly part of it. This week we had Douglas took actually, I'm going to let you read your own bets. Douglas, you read your own bets. Tell us which are plays, which are flyers, and which are futures.
You've got to make me pull those notes back out. I rifled through them. It's, first of all, don't touch Georgia over. Don't touch Georgia over. It's bad math. It's bad process. It's bad value. The books are taking advantage of you. Don't touch Georgia over. If you want to bet that, bet the money line parlays on every game that you can and assume they'll go 12-0. Otherwise, I've got Vanderbilt over 4. I feel really good about that one. I feel less good about the fun flyer that's mostly just proving the point of shopping. Vanderbilt 1,000-1. The more important flyer for me in the SEC is betting on Joe Milton, 20-1 Tennessee to win the SEC. And then my real futures bet in the SEC, the one I believe in, is LSU to win the West. It's at plus 215 at Bet Rivers. You want to take them to win the conference, you can. The math doesn't really work if you want to hedge out when they face Georgia, which is part of why I just stuck straight with the Western Division Championship. That should also get them into the playoff, which will make this wedding present for a friend look like a very generous maneuver by me, and not just, me getting a wedding present for $50 instead of what it would be other, because it could be much more than that, right? I'm being very generous.
Yeah, obviously expected value. I think they were talking about there's a certain event that allowed betting, and it was like, maybe we should give charity to that event, and someone made the comment, well, what if I win this big money and then I donate that to charity, right? But certainly an interesting wedding present. My recap here, to be brief, I'm taking Auburn over 7, got that at plus 115. Missouri over 6. I'm taking a flyer on Texas A&M and the Petrino Resurgence plus 1,600 there. And then of course, the boring bet, Alabama to win the SEC at plus 300. The Nick Saban is actually underrated bet, is as I like to call it. In the Sun Belt,
I was not expecting to hear Nick Saban is underrated multiple times today. I'm going to have a drink and really stew on that.
He's like the song Seven Nation Army by the White Stripes. He's so ubiquitous and so great that people don't understand how truly different he is and how much he shamed the sport. Over in the Sun Belt, I'm gonna get weird with a couple teams and take Arkansas State to go under. I'm gonna take Southern Mississippi to go over, and I'm gonna take Texas State to go over with an App State to win the conference at plus 700. They're banking on a little bit of a flyer with some defensive regression from a program that's been pretty good for a long time.
I've got Louisiana Lafayette under 7.5, James Madison under 8.5, a little bit of money on Georgia Southern at 18-1 and South Mississippi at 40-1 to win the conference. My real bets, one in each division, Troy at 350 to win the conference and Appalachian State with you at 7-1 to win the conference. If those two meet in the conference championship game, you're never going to hear the end of it out of me. Now, Parker, next week, my notes say we're going to talk the Big Ten and the MAC. So again, we're going to kind of combine things, a little bit of big, a little bit of small, but that's how we keep this interesting. We cover the entire gamut.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's my hope to give the same amount of attention to the MAC as we do the Big Ten. I think it's a lot of fun, and college football is a lot of fun. And so we want to talk about those games. But yeah, we'll be back right here on the Hit the Books HQ channel on YouTube every week. Won't be live on Twitter, but you can click the link on Twitter. It'll take you to YouTube. You can watch it there, and make sure you're following, subscribe, turn on alerts just so you don't forget when we're going live, so you can be here. And next week, now that I'm aware that the comment section is popping, we'll absolutely take a couple questions. We'd love to hear from you guys next week as we're doing the show. Sign up for BetStamp using the link. The QR code is right here. And other than that, this has been the first edition of Never Punt, Never Parlay. I think it went well. I think we'll be back next week.